Hello, world. Welcome to the third of our online Love Hub sessions in collaboration with Fringe Film. It's so wonderful to have you here tonight. I am Dr. Will Nutland. I am one of the co-founders and co-directors of the Love Tank. We are partnering tonight with the folks at QueerAF, the folks who are behind the brilliant What the Pox podcast, along with Fringe Film Festival on tonight's special event called What Mpox Teaches Us About Queer Sex. Tonight's event is one of 21, yes, count them, 21 free online and in-person events. If you can already see the tiredness around my eyes, it's because it's already been enormously busy for us. If you missed last night's event on sex work and consent, you missed an absolute corker of a session. And the night before, we did an amazing event called Demystifying Steroids. And if you missed that section, a promise to anyone listening to this either live or on our YouTube channel into the future, there is a promise to you that you'll be able to find everything that we talked about in that steroid session in an online steroid guide that's coming into our queerhealth.info website in the coming weeks. There was stacks of most amazing information from my colleague Dr. Ben Weil on a most brilliant guide that they've produced on demystifying steroids. If you have nothing to do, tomorrow night our fourth online session is a session called That's Dead Gay, That Is, and that's a session on queer bereavement, an issue that I know is very, very close to many of our lives and our hearts. And it's absolutely a session that I'm amazingly looking forward to, hosted by the brilliant Joe Phillips. So if you look on the screen right now, you'll find out how to enroll in that session. And if you are lucky enough to live in East London, from Friday night, all Saturday and all Sunday, we have a whole array of in-person events, both at Rich Mix and at in the basement below the Common Press Bookshop on Bethnal Green Road, where we are going from everything to a Friday night launch event on foot fetishism, right the way through to bondage, flogging, spanking sessions. All of those sessions, of course, you kinky bunch, have sold out. But we do also have a Black Yogi session. Kazar, who is in the room with us now, actually Kazar is going to be part of that flogging session. But we also have events on embodiment and self-care, which involves meditation, and a session that I'm really looking forward to about queers and aging, because I know I'm not getting any older. In fact, none of us are getting any older. I see a bunch of people have already joined tonight's session. You are very welcome. This is being live streamed via our YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter channels. Please note that if you make a comment on any of those comments can be seen publicly. So please, if you do not want your comments to be seen by your great aunt Maud, who happens to follow you on Facebook, please don't put comments into the chat. But if you would like to put comments into the chat, we can see them. If you have questions, if you have links that you would like to share, please put them in, and we would love to have your engagement through tonight's session. Tonight's session, in addition to being beamed live on our YouTube channel, after we finish within an hour, we promise not to go on for longer than an hour, will be available to view on the Love Tank's YouTube channel. So, as I said, we've got a whole set of events coming up in East London later on this week. Tonight, our event is free, as is every other event that we're doing as part of the Love Hub at Fringe Film Festival. We are a small-scale organization. We deliberately keep all of our events free because we want them to be as accessible to as many people as possible. But if you are tuning in tonight and you have an extra pound or euro or dollar, we would love a contribution. Grant, who is in the background there, has beautifully just put up our Just Giving page for this year's Red Run that's being held and organised by Positive East. You can put a quick donation into that button if you would like to. And if you happen to live in London and you would love to join our Red Run team, go to the prepster.info website, where there is a link to come and join us at the end of November, and either do, as I will be doing, a 5K walk around Victoria Park, or you can do, if you are fit and able enough to do that, and there's no way I'm doing that, a 5K or a 10K run around Victoria Park. We would love for you to come and join us. Tonight's event, as I said, is part of Fringe Film Festival and has been organised and run in conjunction with the great folks at QueerAF. I want to send a very, very special shout out tonight to Jamie. Jamie at QueerAF was supposed to be with us here tonight, and actually being in the facilitator's seat that I'm sitting in, and unfortunately Jamie isn't well enough to be with us. Jamie, if you are watching, I know all of us tonight are sending you the biggest love. Heal well. We absolutely love and adore you, Jamie, and we are all fighting for you to see you back with us as soon as possible. But please rest up. Lots and lots of healing energy and power coming right at you, sweetheart. So let's talk about Mpox. I am so privileged tonight to have 4 beautiful colleagues, friends, comrades. Most of us who are here tonight have spent pretty much the last 18 months doing the rounds of these kinds of events, talking about Mpox, doing podcasts. Haroon and I, even when we go on our neighborhood coffees and walks together in East London, we still talk about bleeding Mpox. And we've also, some of us have been out there doing research together and education work, and in some people's cases out there actually helping people to get those Mpox shots into their arms. So I'm going to ask our beautiful panelists tonight to very briefly set the scene by telling us who they are, and very, very briefly your involvement in Mpox. And I'm going to go along the Brady Bunch grid in order as I see you on the panel. So Martin, it would be lovely if you could tell everybody about who you are.
Hi, I'm Martin Joseph. I am the host of What the Pox, a QueerAF podcast that was all about Mpox and documenting exactly what happened and sort of the issues that it raised. And a lot of the wonderful people here today were guests that made it so credible and wonderful and helped so many people.
Martin, it is a fantastic podcast. I'm not saying that just because we are all on it, but it really was such a brilliant way for so many people to find out about Mpox and the politics behind what was happening around Mpox. Just such a brilliant community resource. Congratulations and well done. And it should be out there winning an awards. It really should. It was so beautifully done. Thank you, Martin. And I know one of your regular guests was just along from you. Great colleague, brilliant researcher, someone who has been really out there leading the field on Mpox research. Chloe, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So as Will said, I'm a researcher and a doctor, and for most of my life, I've been an HIV doctor, particularly interested in long-acting HIV therapy. But I became an Mpox doctor, and Mpox took over my entire life. And I established the ShareNet Global Collaborative to try and understand what was happening. And we produced quite a number of papers, actually, including a paper together with Will around how the communities felt about the public health messaging that they were receiving, and the media, which really was messaging. And what about how people were feeling about how they were being portrayed in the media. So I'll just throw that into the mix, and I'll stop now.
Thank you, Chloe. And then one of the other people who has been in the spotlight, someone who really put a human face on monkeypox, or Mpox as we're now calling it, someone who has inspired me, who has been on the front line of activism and anger, and someone whose own personal experience for me caused one of the tipping points of me refusing to remain silent about what we should be doing around Mpox, a very particular situation in a hotel room in Berlin when I was at a conference, and seeing this person's face appear very, very publicly on screen was the thing that actually made me throw my toys out of the pram and said no more bullshit on our response to Mpox. Haroon, you are a massive, massive inspiration to so many of us. Please tell us who you are, Haroon.
You are all inspiration to me, actually, and I was just following your steps in what I am doing. And my name is Harun, and I am a sexual health and HIV activist. I'm living with HIV since 2016, and I'm a training and volunteer manager for Positively UK. And since monkeypox came around, I've been privileged enough to had it and then shared it with all the world. I just wanted to kind of shine a little bit light because it was a huge unknown and it was scary. So like all of us tried to do, I just wanted to share it. So I didn't want it to go down the same road that HIV did years ago. Yeah, thanks to all of you and everybody, I think we did a quite good job in the UK, so, and across the world. So thank you. That's me.
Thank you, Haroon, and you owe me a coffee and a local walk really, really soon, because I've got to get you in the other room. And then last but not least, of course, my amazing, dedicated, inspirational colleague, Keza. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Keza. I am the Under the Radar Vaccine Coordinator at the Love Tank. So what I like to do is go around and bother people in their places of leisure and tell people, please come and get your shot. We have a lovely selection of vaccines here provided by our NHS partners. And wouldn't it be lovely if in the middle of this cacophony of light and sex, you simply got a shot? And that's what I do.
And you do it very, very ably and been very good at cajoling, convincing and persuading people of the benefits of Mpox vaccination. And, you know, Keza and I had the beautiful opportunity of spending last UK's Black Pride together, actually working with some of Chloe's colleagues and colleagues from Homerton Sexual Health Trust in doing a phenomenal amount of community vaccination, 86 people. And we know we could have done twice or three times that number had we got more vaccines. So I've had the privilege and pleasure of working alongside Keza in that work. So folks, I could sing all of your praises for the rest of the session, but time is already ticking by very, very rapidly. Tonight's session is about what Mpox has taught us about queer sex. And it's not, tonight's session, folks, is not another Mpox session. We've done loads of those. I want us to take tonight's conversation beyond that and think about the things that we've learned from Mpox around where we go next, including pleasure and consent and body autonomy, and how we treat each other as sexual beings, and how we look after ourselves and how we look after our communities and the spaces in which we operate. However, having said that, I feel like we should spend a few minutes, each of us, just reflecting on where we are with Mpox right now, because I know that the situation has changed. It's changed in a place like London, where I think all of us are right now. But I would like us, just each of us, really, really quickly to reflect on where we are now. And Chloe, I'm going to come to you first, because you're both a researcher and a clinician, but kind of in under a minute, can you tell us where we are? What are you seeing in clinics right now?
Where we are right now is that there are sporadic infections and people being diagnosed. And this is the case all over, because I do a lot of talks and I've just been in different European countries and everyone's telling me the same thing. So every now and then there's a pop-up. And I think we have to understand that there is now sustained transmission in humans, and the virus is out there. We know that there can be very, very minor disease, just one little ulcer or nothing, or very, very minor lesions. So people may not know they have it, and you can be infectious up to 4 days before you have any symptoms. So it is out there. It's spreading in small numbers. Lots of people have had it. Lots of people have been vaccinated. So it's not the huge problem it was, but it's out there. And that's important. So if you haven't been vaccinated, get a vaccine.
And as a heads up, if you are in the UK, particularly if you are in London, where the vast majority of cases are, you can still get a free Mpox vaccine, a first or a second, and you can get that regardless of your immigration status. So if you have insecure immigration status, if you are a student, if you are here visiting for a short block of time, you can get an Mpox shot from any NHS or most NHS sexual health clinics. And actually, we will get a link put up in just a second. If you go to mpx.shl.uk, so that's mpx.shl.uk, that gives you a full list of currently available clinics in London. And so I'm actually going to go to Keza. Keza, you're still out there talking to people at sex events and parties and clubs and all sorts of places. What are you hearing about Mpox through your outreach work?
So I feel like there are three distinct kind of directions that the conversation is going in. I've been doing most of the UTR vaccination pop-ups at sex on premises venues, but then not all sex on premises venues are built the same, and not all of them have the same kind of clientele. So the three attitudes tend to be: number one, where people have been fairly on top of getting their vaccine sorted out. They've had both shots. Sometimes they've even had their second shot already in 2022. Oh, number two is what people are really aware that second shots were available. Oh, sorry, does someone have the microphone on? Because I can hear a little bit of feedback on myself. It's quite
You're all good.
Oh, we're good. Thank you. Yeah. So secondly, I've been seeing people who have been very aware of getting their first shot. They were part of that initial cohort who were getting their shots back in the summer of 2022, and then who have been surprised that second shots are even available, that they're even something that they can access. I generally say that we haven't heard about this. It's not been in the news. We didn't know this was still a thing, et cetera, et cetera. And then on finding us, on seeing that UTR events are happening, they're surprised that shots are actually even available. And part of that could be down to some muddled messaging as far as when shots would be available up until, and all the mass text messages that came out that said as much. And obviously part of it is some people were in monogamous relationships at the times, or have gone into monogamous relationships, closed, that is. And then finally, the third group are people who don't even know what Mpox is. And this is the group that we're trying to target the most with the under the radar campaigns. And this tends to be people who don't necessarily live in London, people who identify as heterosexual but practice sex with men, and people who almost exclusively get their sex from anonymous / SOPV sources. So not so much within places where there's strong social connections with the rest of the community. But that tends to be a group that is still actually receiving a lot of first shots as well. So that's generally what we're seeing on the ground so far.
So lots of work still to do, I think we would all agree. Martin and Haroon, again, quickly, probably 30 seconds each. What are you both picking up? What's the vibe in the communities that you're kind of around? Martin, let's go with you. We go with you first.
I think there's still a little bit of people don't think it was a thing. If they didn't come into contact with it, or they didn't know someone that had Mpox or went through Mpox, a lot of people that I still talk to now just, oh, was that a thing? Like I'm still finding a lot of that with what I'm talking about constantly, and with what I do, because it's mostly just talking about my lived experience. Actually, there's been less of a demand for me to actually talk about it, which shows that there's a bit of a wane in interest, maybe from media, from the public. It's not as much of a hot topic anymore, and that's something that I think needs to change. We still need to be discussing it.
Still need to be discussing it. That's exactly why you and the folks at QueerAF wanted to do this event with us tonight. We need to keep having these conversations. Haroon, tell us.
Like what Martin said, I think the conversations a little bit fell flat around Mpox. Like again, you can tell that from the events and the conversations happening around Mpox, or the the Twitter fires happening sometimes about people discussing Mpox. But I think as the political side of the things, this is what some people want to do, and this is what us activists don't want to go down the pathway, because we have to, we might be safe in the UK. We saw that cases were actually flared up during the Pride season in June. So like Chloe said, that it is a virus and it is still out there. So we don't want those conversations to end. We just want to keep it going. We just want protection and prevention for everybody. And we just want it to available to everybody with targeted campaigns. So, but generally speaking, on the dating apps, on the hookups, Mpox or have you got your vaccine kind of conversations a little bit got quieter. But yeah, that's what I actually saw so far.
Thank you, Haroon. So, Haroon and Chloe, the next, I want to move the conversation on and get a response from both of you about. We have absolutely seen both in the UK and globally that Mpox is disproportionately impacting, particularly on gay men who have either been diagnosed with HIV or, in Chloe, you've picked up through some of your very high-profile research work, particularly in places like South and Central America, some really quite alarming cases of people with very severe cases of Mpox who were then going on to have undiagnosed HIV. What's kind of, without us focusing specifically on Mpox, I'm wondering though what Mpox is illuminating or shining a light on around broader health inequalities. Why is it that we are still in a situation in the world where very basic health technologies, point of care HIV testing, access to HIV treatments, which is now costing like pennies to administer? Why are we still in a situation that there are people, gay and bisexual men and other people in the world, who are being impacted so badly by an infection like Mpox because we don't have those other cheap technologies in place that we all might take for granted? And what the heck should we be doing about that? Chloe, let's maybe start with you.
So thank you for that. I agree with everything that you said. In our case series, there was a very close association with HIV throughout, as has been pointed out, up to 50% of some cohorts being people living with HIV. And I think there is a huge relationship with inequities. And in the US, although 60% of the population are white, only 30% of the people who developed Mpox are white, showing you just the extreme extent of their disparities. And this was the same in other countries. And I think some of the disparities were really around how vaccinations were offered, with large, all of the imagery across the whole world is of long lines of white men queuing up. And that's why outreach events like you've alluded to in Black Pride are so very important. But in our case series, I think what we found is that a lot of the people, there was only about 9% who were undiagnosed, and those people were not being offered PrEP, quite obviously. But actually, a lot of people had disengaged from care, and there were a lot of people who were not on antiretrovirals. So, as you say, that was a case series in 16 countries, predominantly in America, and also in South and Central America. So, I think it really, for me, it shone a light on, if anything, sort of the second 90, in that people were not remaining on treatment, and at least half were not virally suppressed. So that was a really shocking finding in our case series. And obviously, we found that people with advanced HIV were developing sort of a whole new disease, which is very severe disseminated Mpox, which basically was behaving like other illnesses that cause opportunistic infections, so severe disease. So I think there are a lot of lessons. Offer PrEP. At vaccination events, offer PrEP. At vaccination events, offer an HIV test. If you know somebody who you think may not have had a test, tell them this is the time to have a test, because people can get very, very sick very quickly. And be aware that people with low CD4 counts can get very, very sick with Mpox.
Great, stunning.
I'm not sure if I actually answered any of your questions. Well, I think I was more like a politician and just gave my own message that I felt was necessary to give.
Really important stuff for you to be saying. Haroon, have you got anything to add to that?
No, I never have anything to add what Chloe said. She always puts it out, greatly and clearly. But the one thing actually I witnessed from the very first day of Mpox is, I think when it comes to queer health, authorities are always delaying to put some precautions in place, and we always suffer by it. It was always been the same, and it's kind of heartbreaking to see it still happening in 2023. I don't even mention about inequalities all across the world. I always say, I think Claire kind of sick of that sentence that I keep on saying, that if one of us is not safe, none of us is safe. But even in the UK, we think that we are very privileged in the healthcare system. We saw that we didn't take the precautions quite early, and we waited enough. And I kind of take it a little bit on purpose, saying that, oh, it is only between queer people. So, let's wait and see. It impacts on the wider community, so we can start doing something about it. And this approach, I think we don't learn our lessons. This approach never works. And from all the conversations and the meetings we've been attending, we saw that the countries like, well, my hometown Turkey, or the third world countries or developing countries, the countries that actually being a queer person is actually not legal, or being very under fire, been suffered a lot, because if they admitted to Mpox was happening, or ordered a vaccine or to a vaccination program, they would actually admit that queer people exist. So those countries been very much impacted with that, because no precautions were taken in those countries. It's quite sad to see. And us Western countries, we just couldn't do anything, sadly. Like we couldn't do anything around HIV inequalities over the years. You know what I mean? And it's kind of quite heartbreaking. And we just become much clear right now that we really need to solve these inequalities, and we have to give everybody an equal opportunity to protect themselves, unless, otherwise we won't be able to fight any virus.
So Haroon absolutely agree there, and what I want to do is take that same theme on for both Martin and Keza, and think about, in addition to those global inequalities, in the UK, we've seen, as a couple of us have already mentioned, real inequalities about who is getting diagnosed with Mpox, but also who is accessing or able to access Mpox vaccine. Martin, through your work with What the Pox, what were you uncovering?
I mean, exactly that there was a lot of people that looked like me standing in queues. Like that happened because the only messaging that was around, especially in the very early days, was targeted specifically at, basically because people think it's just white cis gay men that exist, and that's the only people that this was impacting. But it wasn't. Like the queer community is so diverse, and it's so interconnected, and so it's not one thing. And so you can't put us into a box because we break out of the box, right? So I think anything going forward, we need to acknowledge that we are like a massive alphabet of people, and there is so many people, not just one letter and one ethnicity and one type of person that something like this is going to impact. And it's not always clear to people that don't have any experience of our community, like who that impacts. But then listen to us, because there was people going to clinics saying, no, I definitely need to be treated for this. I definitely need this vaccination, and they're being turned away, or they were being told that no, this isn't for you. And the biggest thing I got was that just listen to people, because they know what they need. Like I knew I needed help. There was moments where I had to beg for treatment or help or support. And I know Haroon had a very similar thing. Like listen to people, because we know our community, and we know our health needs. And that's, if that answered your question.
It does, absolutely. Listen to those people with knowledge right on the ground, and that fits really nicely to what I just want to draw Keza into, because Keza, you've been quite literally out there trying to address all of these issues, trying to meet those very, very people missed through kind of mainstream sexual health services. Keza, how have you responded, or how have we as an organization and the work that you've spearheaded on that responded to this kind of issues around inequalities?
So one thing we know is the people most likely to have not taken up the vaccine yet are also the same people who are most likely to be impacted by wider health inequalities, both in sexual health and otherwise. And while that is certainly the case on, say, gender, on lines of gender and on lines of race, it's also in lines of age as well. A lot of the Mpox messaging that's gone out hasn't really targeted people who are considerably older, but also are still very sexually active. It also hasn't really targeted people, again, who I've mentioned before, people who practice sex with men, but who don't identify as gay or as bi. But yeah, just circling back to that original point, it does seem to reflect wider sexual health inequalities, but not necessarily a lack of enthusiasm either, which tends to be something that gets brought up. Like, oh, there is a distrust of medical establishments within certain communities. And while that's definitely true, when offered the vaccine, it has been taken up extremely enthusiastically, particularly at events like UK Black Pride, at events like the Alternative Pride Festival at Colour Factory, which was very well attended by both people of color and by trans people. So even though there is that notion of institutional distrust, the wider message is that there is an enthusiasm out there to engage and to look after oneself and take care of one's own sexual health, but the provision and the access needs to be there, and needs to be there on the terms of the communities themselves.
And Kaiser, I was very struck by one of the events that we did from our office, when there was such a huge number of young queer people who are involved in sex work, including trans and non-binary young queer people involved in sex work, who were telling us that they had tried to get Mpox at clinics and being told that they were ineligible. And I think, you know, we've been picking up huge numbers, not just with those people, but huge numbers of people in the events we've been doing, including some of the fetish event work that you've been doing, Kaiser, where we are absolutely astonished by people telling us that I haven't yet even had one vaccine. And these are often people who are connected into these things like the kink scene, the people who we would assume would be first in line. And so I again, I want us to what I don't want us to do in this next response is to bash the absolutely stunning individual and collective health services that we have, because all of us have experience of using them. Some of us work within them or work alongside health services. So what I'm not wanting us to do at this stage is to say my local clinic is crap, because we all know that many of those clinics are absolutely on their knees. But I've been acutely aware through some of the research I've been involved in is that if you take a map of the UK and you map out where it's impossible or really, really hard to get an Mpox vaccine, and you put that map on top of where it's really hard, or people are telling us it's impossible to get hold of HIV PrEP, those maps completely match, which is starting to tell us there are some really fundamental systemic problems with how some of our sexual health services are commissioned or delivered or structured. And Mpox has shone a light on this. So given the question for tonight is what Mpox teaches us about queer sex, for me, it's teaching us about, or has helped us again to illuminate these massive inequalities in accessing sexual health services. So Chloe, just now you said you're making a political statement, you're getting on a soapbox. This is a time again for all of us, one by one. What should we be doing individually, collectively, in our organizations, in our institutions? And Chloe, without putting the answer in your mouth, because I think I want to also hear what else you have to say. I'm always really taken, Chloe, that at every event that we've been to recently, you've made a call to action for your colleagues to start standing up and talking and yelling and being political. So I am going to come to you, Chloe, and see if you want to say that again in your own words, or if there's anything else you want to say. And then I'm going to go Martin, Kaiser, Haroon.
Yeah, and I've given two talks on Mpox today, and I've spoken about activism and that it's not just for people living with the condition to speak up. And I think that it's not about aggrandizing yourself, but we all have a responsibility. It's not about producing papers. It's about making impact in the world, changing the world, creating a benefit. So what is the benefit of my NEJM paper if people, doctors on the front line trying to diagnose Mpox are looking at the wrong case definition because the public health agencies haven't changed the definition? It's my job to write to them and say, it's my job. It's anyone's job. It's not more my job than anyone's, but there's no reason it shouldn't be me. Why shouldn't I say, change the guidelines? I'm a clinician in London. Do something differently. And why shouldn't I argue when I spoke to the WHO around last week around, ability of countries to have access to tests so they can confirm their cases? It's not someone else's responsibility. It reminds me of that poem. It's a bit late in the day, but it's something about, if I don't speak out for the Jews, there'll be no one left to speak out for me. And I think we need to remember that as healthcare professionals, we're all going to be living with health conditions at some point. So we better start speaking up.
And, as someone who works in public health, I always say that being a public health professional is about being an activist. Public health is inherently political. And we shouldn't forget that. Martin, what the Pox has been in itself a piece of great political activism. It's really galvanized lots of people. Tell us what you think.
I would say that everyone's got a platform, and you use your voice however you can use your voice. And sometimes that can feel like you're not doing enough. Like when we made that show, I didn't feel like I was doing enough because we were talking about these big global issues. But I know when I spoke to Chloe last time, you said about strikes that were happening in the NHS and explained why that was so relevant to Mpox, and about that this was to help healthcare. And the simple ask was just support it, or at least don't stand in the way of it. And there's so many things you can do that don't take a lot. Like all the information I got, I've said this so many times, at the beginning of this outbreak was coming from people on their social media feed, or you can use your and be an ally where you can. So the show that I created, I called Jamie Wareham, QueerAF, who as a friend, and I called him and I said, I haven't told anyone, but I know you've been through things and you might help support me as a friend. And he said, I'm going to give you a platform. And he worked tirelessly, and QueerAF worked tirelessly for free for a year to get my voice out there because they just wanted to help. And I think it's really important that whatever your platform, even if it's just talking to your friends or right to your politician, whatever you can do, just do it, but do something if you really care.
Martin, I forgot to say at the beginning, you've just reminded me, we want to send solidarity out today to all of those NHS consultants who are on strike. I don't want to assume I'm speaking for anybody else in this, but from my perspective and the perspective of the Love Tank, that strike action is so important. And I know it's a really difficult thing to do, and none of us wants to do it. But there comes a time when we really have to stand up. So you do absolutely, if you are striking right now, you have both my personal and my organization's absolute 100% solidarity in that strike. Keza, do you have anything about the politics and activism that you want to add?
Honestly, I don't even think particularly radical to say other than fund the hell out of it. There really is no other way to frame it. And I would love to wax lyrical about the importance of inclusion within different health services, the way in which sexual health is interconnected with other aspects of health that are routinely dismissed as special interest when they're at the heart of a healthy society. But in the end, it's a material need. So it needs to be funded to the degree that people can actually, people as individuals and society as a whole can actually remain healthy. So fund it, fund it, fund it. That's all I got to say.
Absolutely fund it. Haroon, last word on this one.
But strangely enough, I recently watched the movie V for Vendetta again, and I just wanted to remind people that actually the quote in there is really right. People shouldn't be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. And this actually reminds us that please don't keep it quiet. Don't say that you can't do anything. You can do something. You can just vote. Even this is some certain kind of action to kind of take precautions or just protect each other. Or you can just do small things. Don't think that one virus or one condition is just impacts one certain group. No, there is no such thing. There's no such rule in the world. You can become one of those patients one day. One of your loved ones become impacted by any of those conditions one day. So that every time when you keep it quiet, every time when you don't stand up to any kind of unfairness, just don't forget that you can face. It's actually very quite near that you may be facing one of those unfair situations. So please don't keep it quiet. Just do something. If you can't do anything, donate for the people who are doing it, so we can really more than happy to do it for you. This is our job. This is our life anyway, isn't it? Will, you will agree on that to me.
Absolutely. And folks, thank you for responding to that last question. I want us to kind of move the conversation on so that we're again focusing on what Mpox teaches us about queer sex. And some of the stuff we've talked about tonight has been about dealing with inequalities, dealing with underfunding, dealing with constant fighting against the system. And as someone who has been an HIV activist and worked in this field and for more than 30 years, and then became a syphilis activist and an Mpox activist and all the rest of it, we quite often respond in times of crisis. So I wouldn't have done everything I did around Mpox if we hadn't been in the situation we were in. And I wonder if anyone, and I'm not going to take everyone because again, I've noticed we're 2/3 of the way through already, but if anyone has a thought on positively moving forward around resilience and resistance that's beyond crisis, how do we do great queer health activism, but not when we're responding to an outbreak or like a bunch of shit? Does anyone have any perspectives on how we might do that?
Mine would be on a community level, like being kind to people. Like if you receiving a phone call from someone about a diagnosis and that maybe you need to go to like having those really conversations of being grateful and thankful for someone sharing their story or their status or whatever it is, and caring about your health enough to let you know information. Like I think on a community level, and I'm speaking specifically as a cis gay man, I think we could really do some like grassroots community work around shame and stigma when it comes to diagnosis and health and all those things, and really respecting each other and thanking someone for sharing information with us, and really being kind and caring and compassionate when someone is going through something, and not automatically responding with judgment and fear and shame. And I think that's something we could do like really grassroots level, just continuously, and make sure that's something where if you're able to go out and have like really adult sex with other adults and really be mature enough to do that, then you have to be mature enough to have the conversations about the ramifications of things that can happen as a result of that.
Martin, you remind me, I know we had this conversation on what the Pox. One of the things we did at the Love Tank around and some of our Mpox social media, something that we did with a great group of people called Impact Global, who are based in California. We put out some social media when we wanted to challenge some of the narratives that we were hearing some of our communities around responding to Mpox. And one of them was, if someone tells you that they have Mpox and you respond aggressively and with anger and with blame and negatively, then that's going to impact on how that person does or doesn't respond to everybody else. If you respond with affirmations and thanks, and you offer help, and you say, that would have been really hard for you to tell me that, and I appreciate it, that means that person is more likely to then go on to tell other people they could have potentially passed Mpox on to. And for us as an organization, we've taken the gems of that and tried to build that into our other narratives around sexual health, not just around Mpox, but around things like syphilis or HIV or gonorrhea or chlamydia. And for me, I think one of the things that Mpox has taught me and the Love Tank as an organization is about trying to foster more positive, constructive conversations with our sexual partners. Anyone else want to add to that?
I think we need to not recognize us personally, but remember that epidemiology works in probabilities. It does not work in certainties. And what that means is that your sexual behavior in and of itself is not always a determinant on who gets what. If we move away from that mindset, we start to move away from the same kind of reductive who does and does not deserve to have gotten something or to contracted something, and therefore who does and does not deserve treatment, because it's that kind of network of guilt and punishment that makes it difficult for people to come forward and admit that, unfortunately, I have something and I want to be able to share this, or at least the news that I have this with a sexual partner, so that they are aware that they might need to get tested. And part of that then harkens back to, well, what's needed is comprehensive relationship and sexual health education at the high school and at the high school level, partly because so much of what is discussed in schools in terms of sexual health is not only terrifyingly out of date and extremely useless for a lot of people for what they do, but just the euphemisms that I made use of, the lack of modern language, the embarrassment that comes around talking about sex when what should be happening is a much more frank and honest conversation, so that people can feel empowered within their own bodies and within their own sexual health choices, even at that level. Because if we're not going to teach it, then porn is going to teach it for us, and porn's not always the best teacher.
And Kayla, there's a really great reminder here, and I'm going to ask Grant if Grant can put this up in the link, that we have again a whole load of in-person events coming up at Rich Mix and Common Press this coming weekend in East London, the Love Hub 23, that actually is dealing with some of these issues around consent and body image and how we communicate with each other, all free. If you happen to be in East London, sign up to them, or just come along and have some conversations. It's going to be an amazing weekend. Chloe, I know that you had your hand up, so let's go over to you.
Well, this is a thought from left field. It's not a professional thought, but so one thing that we've noticed, I've been talking about with my wife a lot, is that when we watch TV, like the programs now, ever since BLM, are just much more inclusive, and it even includes adverts. And Black people are no longer the baddie in every TV show. They're now, the Black woman is like the head constable or the principal of the school or the consultant physician. And I think that there are gay characters now, and there's lesbians and there's disabled people, and that's great, but they don't go far enough in terms of sex positivity. Like you've got like a sort of vanilla like gay couple who are very sweet, but you never see them touch each other, or so I think it's about trying to go beyond that, I guess, and trying to influence people in the media, people who are making films, because it's making a massive difference. You can see how it will shift things when you see Black people in power, Black women in power, Black men in power who are not the baddies. And I think it's the same thing, but we need to try and bring sex into it. It's not just about the fact that they're a gay person, tick the box. What is it about gay people that makes them discriminated against? It's the sex act. So it's a huge part of it anyway. So I think that's what we have to try and we have all these ability to influence. We should be influencing, I think, this narrative, because that's what people respond.
Influencing on so many levels, and that was thank you, Chloe, for that left field comment, really relevant to the conversation. Haroon, I'm going to put I hope I'm not going to put you on the spot. I want us again, and we are coming into the last sprint of tonight. This is going massively fast, at least it is for me. Haroon, I want to reflect on queer spaces. I want to reflect on the places where some of us go to meet each other for sex, some of the sex on premises venues that Kaysa's alluded to. And I wonder if Mpox has done anything positively about those spaces and how those spaces operate and how we encounter each other in those spaces.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. Yes, actually, it impacted positively because now we just showed the world once again that as queer people, we know how to take care of ourselves and take care of each other. And we saw these reflections on those sex on premise venues, wherever it is, in the festivals or whatever. We just, because I think after everything we've been through, so many endemics, pandemics, and the social disasters and the attacks and stigma and discrimination we've been through, we know how to protect each other. So we try to make those conversations okay with each other. So you saw those. This is clearly in those venues that people are asking those questions to each other. They are not afraid. They say that when did you last time get tested? When did you get your Mpox vaccine in your arm? You know, and nobody's actually feeling ashamed. Or I don't say like 100% of our community. There is still work to be done, but most of our community is there already, and you could see that in those venues. In the peak of the Mpox cases, we saw that actually we stopped having sex. And you did an amazing survey to prove that, actually, Will. And we showed that actually queer communities stopped having sex to kind of show the world that when we did our best to protect each other. And those venues were the places that actually people were, you know, seeing less during this period. And you guys did fantastic job going to those venues and giving people vaccinations, because not everybody is engaged with the community or the social media enough. So I think we are there, but what I just want to echo on what Chloe said, that sex positivity is actually leading everything, leading stigma, like being able to talk about sex and not being afraid of asking what you want or what you need is something really we need to focus on. Because if we can take the sex out of the taboo, like a normal need that we have, I think we will really easily get over with the stigma and lack of information, lack of testing, that people will demanding much better sexual health. And those venues won't be under fire, and we'll be taking much normal thing like any other places we go to eat food or drink or have fun. You know what I mean? It's just, we need to take these taboo things and the old school knowledge, just break down the barriers and start, I think, fresh by, you know, being accepted and open to everything. And those venues are the places this already started. So
and Haroon, many of those places were quite literally on the front line of the response to Mpox, both before we had vaccines available.
Yeah.
Know from the work that Kaysa's been doing, those venues have been lining up saying, what can I do? How can we help? What do you need me to do next? And also, and I'm going to bring us to a close in just a moment. Each of you know that I'm going to ask you, pre-warning, to do one quick, pithy, positive, forward-looking closing comment. But when as you're thinking that up, I also want to acknowledge and applaud all of those people, including some of us in the room, who have been brave enough and have the privilege enough to step forward and to be quite open about either living with HIV or being someone in a queer relationship or a PrEP user or someone who has had Mpox, or someone who has thought that they have had Mpox, or someone who is quite okay about being out to the world and saying there is nothing shameful about having loads and loads of sex, and actually there's nothing for me. And I'm putting my hand up and saying I love having lots and lots of sex. For me, it's as, you know, it's as an important part of my life as all of the other things I like doing, that I like having lots of. And I should probably not say anything more there. So you're no more than 1 minute each, so they can absolutely finish on time. Closing pithy comment. I am going to go Brady Bunch order as well. So Martin, Chloe, and Haroon, and then Kaysa, you will get the last word. Martin, over to you.
I guess my closing thing is use your voice and use that to support people, to push for change, and also to respond with kindness and support for people, especially when it comes to diagnosis. I'm someone that's sharing a point of contact with you. Just make sure that we're adding more kindness to the conversation and that we are open and honest and friendly with each other, but also use that same voice to actively search for change and support those people that need it.
Thank you, Martin. Chloe.
I'll keep it sweet and short. Have an HIV test if you haven't had one. If you have had one, tell somebody else that it's not so bad and it's worth having. And finally, you equals you.
Thank you, Chloe. Haroon.
If you learned something today, please do share it in some way. Like what Chloe said, tell it to some person, one person, just tweet about it, just whatever you learned, whatever changed or sound different or just changed your mind, just please share it. I hope you can share something about U equals U though along the lines, but just share it because that one tweet, that one message, just WhatsApp someone saying that, oh, I read about it actually, people on treatment can't pass HIV on, or just they are doing actually testing and vaccinations on the sex venues. So that kind of information, we just start a conversation somewhere, and it starts in small steps. So let's do that, and then let's just make it bigger and bigger until we change the whole world.
Thank you, Haroon. Keza.
If you care about encouraging the community to get their shots, to get tested, or to get initiated onto PrEP, nothing compares to peer support. Make sure you're having those conversations with the people close to you and the people within your community, because having those conversations works so much better than any number of sexual health campaigns. It's by far our best weapon. So have those conversations with people, encourage them to get tested, and encourage them to get onto PrEP if they need to, and to get their shots.
Thank you. All amazing points. I want to close by thanking all of you tonight for being part of this. I want to thank Grant, who none of you can see, but has been in the background putting the little slides up, but also helping us with tech, and also has been just the most amazing person who has helped us put all of these 21 events together. I want to send out a massive, massive salute to the Fringe Film Festival team, all of whom are volunteers and are doing an amazing job organising dozens of events in East London across this week. I want to again salute the most amazing NHS staff who've been right on the front line during a period of austerity, of massive cuts by the Tory government that have been going on for 12 or 13 or more years. And I want to also salute the amazing community members who consistently come together to respond to things like Mpox. What has Mpox taught me about queer sex? It's taught me that our communities are fucking brilliant in just about every way possible. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for deciding to spend your time this evening together, or if you're watching the YouTube channel. Bless you all for spending the time together, and we'll see you very, very soon. Take care out there in the world. Look after yourselves and look after each other. Good night.